All right. Yeah, we're now on YouTube. I'm gonna do kind of if anyone has requests on Discord or if you want to ask live. I think there's just one person. Everyone's studying for calculus, presumably. So what I was planning to do is just a few of the midterm problems that I haven't done the other day, and those would be kind of the harder ones, I suppose. So. Let's just I'll just start doing stuff and we'll see kind of how it goes. I think I'll go for like, I don't know, 20 minutes, 25 minutes or something, unless there's like requests. So I want to start by talking about, oh sorry, I'm not sharing. So I want to start with, I guess, 2022, the digits of pi question. So here what we're doing, hello. So here, so if you have kind of other requests, feel free to, hi Oscar. So just, I'm just doing midterm questions, but if there's questions, requests, happy to do that. So I'm doing this one right now. So here what we want to do is we want to print the next digit of pi every time. And there's going to be kind of at most 10 times that next digit pi is called. So what that means is that we don't actually need to like compute pi or anything, because I can just get pi from math.pi like so. This is of course a number. But like the easiest thing you can do is you can just convert it to a string, like so. So we haven't yet done indexing of strings, but we'll do that next week. And what you can do is you can just say, what is str math.pi at 0? So this is just this string. So literally like, the digit 3 point, the digit 1, and so on. So this would be, point, and this would be 1, and this would be 4, and so on. So the other thing that we want to do here is we want to have this function. So this is next digit pi. And we want it to return a new thing every time. So if you're returning a new thing every time, it must mean that you have some kind of global variable, right? So because otherwise you cannot keep track of, oh, this was already called the once. So this is similar to how we locked out the user when they tried to do kind of 3 passwords in a row and so on. So here, one approach would be to just keep track of how many digits of pi have we already returned. So the first time we want to return 3, then we want to return 1, and then we return 4, and so on. So now I'll do it. I'll say import math. And there's multiple ways. But the way I'll do it is I'll say, okay, so pi string is, str math.pi. And then I'll also have like a current index that's going to be global. And then what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, initially current index is going to be 0, and we'll return 3. And then the next time we hope that the current index would be 2, so we'll return 1. So we need to skip this guy as well. So, okay. So basically what I want to do is return pi str at current index. And I want for current index to increase by 1 every time. So that's the basics of it. And now I want to figure out the details. So one annoying detail is, okay, so what should current index be? And the issue here is, well, if I set current index to 0 initially, what's going to happen is current index is going to get incremented by 1, and then I'm actually returning current and pi at 1 the first time, so I'll return the dot, which I don't want to do. So one way to solve it is to just say, okay, current index initially is going to be -1, so that when I return pi str at current index, the first time I'll return pi str 0 because I will have incremented current index first. So the next annoying issue is that actually the first time I do want to return 0, but then I want to return at 2, and then I want to return at 3. So that means that I basically want to say, if current index is 0, I actually want to jump to 2. So, okay. So I'll say if current index is not equal to 0, then incremented by 1. Otherwise, current index should become 2. Because if it's 0, I want it to jump to 2 the next time. And that's it. That will do it. So if I say print next digit pi, so call it once, syntax error. That is 3. And then if I call it twice, 3, 1, call it 3 times, it's 3, 1, 4, and so on. So that'll do it. If there's questions about this, you can look. Again, I'm kind of just talking, obviously, into the camera. I have no idea if people are happy, not happy, whatever. So just ask.
I have a question about the midterm in general. Do you care if we use a pen or a pencil? I know some.
No, I don't.
You don't? Okay,
That's me.
cool.
Yeah. So what happens is we scan. We just kind of scan everything, and pencil kind of scans just fine. And then, like it used to be that, like, like in principle, when everything is on paper and then you get like the paper version returned, then some people sometimes worried because that happened. It's like some people would like erase their previous answer and write the new answer and then ask for a regrade. So for that reason, people didn't want like to have it written in pencil, but that's not the issue anymore. I actually had like the one time I had a student who actually, well, like at the time it wasn't paper, and the student actually like got the midterm back, and then because like it wasn't pen, so they couldn't like erase it. But what they did is they like tried to print out a new version of the midterm and then like rewrite everything, grade themselves like incorrectly, and then ask for a regrade. And it almost worked, except like they couldn't quite format the midterm in the same way that I did. So I caught them. Yeah. But I was impressed by the effort, if not by the integrity. Yeah, other questions? All right. So yeah, so again, like questions, requests, happy to do anything. So I will also do kind of the few questions from 2020 that I can do because they're kind of solvable with the tools that you have now that I haven't done yet. So I guess this would be share and 1. So this is kind of like a little bit of an annoying question. It was the last question in the midterm. So what it says is, so matrices can be represented as list of lists, blah, blah, blah. So what we want to know is whether M1 and M2 share columns. And specifically, we want them to share n-1 columns, but not n columns. So in this example, right, so this column is the same as this column. And then also this column is the same as this column. And then the other ones are different. Okay, so we want to know whether the matrices share those columns. Let me write this. So the way I'll approach this is I'll first write a helper function. And the helper function would be, does column I equal to of the first matrix equals to column J of the second matrix? So I'll say M1 and M2, and I'll say column 1, and I'll say column 2. And the goal is to return true if column 1, well, 1 equals column 2 of M2. Okay. So that's the goal. And then if I can have that, then it becomes a little bit easier to do the problem. So let me do a quick detour and just do print column I. So print column I. So how do I do that? So what is column I? It's like M at 0i, and then M at 1i, and then M at 2i, and so on, right? So I'm saying like entry I of row 0, and then entry I of row 1, and then entry I of row 2, and so on. So why does that make sense? Well, because like M100, M10, M20, right? So M1 here at 2 is this guy. So element number 2 of this matrix, which is just this row, because really the matrix is just a list of rows. And then we're saying at 0 at 0, at 0 at 1, at 0 at 2. So that would be column 0. And then the same for column 1. So at 1 at 0, at 1 at 1, at 1 at 2. So, okay. So that's what we want to print. So I'll just say for J, because I is already taken, right? So I'll say for J in range length of M. So length of M is the number of elements of M. So that means the number of rows, because the rows are the elements. I'll print M at J at I. All right, is that good with everyone? Okay. All right, so now that we have this, what do we need basically in order to know whether two columns are equal? We need to just go through both M1 and M2 and just say, okay, like if I print out both columns, would it print out the same thing essentially? So I'll follow the same pattern. So I'll say for J in range length M1, and I'll say if M1 at J at column 1 is not equal to M2 at J at column 1, then I return false because I found a mismatch. And then if I've never found a mismatch, I'll return true. Okay. So the goal here is to say I have two matrices, and let's say I'm comparing this column and this column. I'm saying, is this entry the same as this? If not, return false. Is this entry the same as this? If not, return false. Is this entry the same as this? If not, return false. If I haven't returned false, then I return true. Okay. I know nobody's saying anything, so I'm assuming it's okay.
Good question. Sorry. So why are we comparing column 1 of M2 to column 2 of M1 and not column 1
I
and
just
column 1?
I just want to do it, right? So once I've done it, then so the goal here is to see how many columns M1 and M2 share. And then as a sub goal, I'm saying I want to be able to compare two columns.
Okay.
So now that they can do it, I'm gonna say, okay, so what do I need to do? So what I need to do basically is to say count how many columns in M1 are equal to some column in M2. So that's kind of the problem solving thing here. So it's like not an obvious step, but you can solve it this way, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so in your call equal function, why don't we ever use call two? Like
Oh,
we
that's a
use
good
M1,
point. I
M2.
meant call two. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. Thank
okay,
you.
okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. All right. So okay. So now what we're gonna say is okay, so count how many columns in M1 also occur in M2. So basically that's the same as saying, like this column, is it equal to this or this or this? And then this column, is it equal to this or this or this? And then this column, is it equal to this and this and this? And then count how many times the answer was yes. So let me write a helper function for that. So how is that going to work? So I'm just going to try every possible column 2. So I'm going to say for column 2 in range length to 0, right? So like how many entries are in the first row of M2? That's length of M to 0. So this is assuming that M1 and M2 are the same size. And then I'm going to say, okay, so if it's equal to column 2, then great, we'll just return true. And then if I tried and I compared column 1 and M1 to any column in column 2, it didn't work out, I'll return false. Okay, so all that's left now is to say, okay, all right, so for every column in M1, I'm going to see if it's equal to any of the columns in M2, and if it is, I'll increase the count. So I'll say for column 1 in range length M1 0. So every column in M1, I'm going to say if column 1 is equal to any of columns 2, then increment count by 1. And then if there are m-1 columns in M1 that are equal to any of the columns in M2, then I return true. If not, I return false. So return count is equal to length from 1, 0 minus 1. And that's it. right? So this was obviously kind of like the last question on the midterm and like not an easy question. But you kind of see that like if you well, I mean like you can say it about like a lot of problems that once you see it, it's kind of obvious. And maybe it's still not obvious because it's kind of a lot. But I would say kind of once you see it and once you see kind of the logic of it, I think it becomes easy. So I think kind of if you decompose it into kind of columns equal, and then you say, well, like how do I use columns equal in order to see whether column one and M1 is equal to any of the columns in M2, then this logic is kind of like not difficult. And then once you have this, then yes, like this is also kind of a problem solving step where you say, oh, like what does it mean that M1 and M2 share n-1 columns? Well, it just means I can count how many times it's the case that column 1 does match some column in M2, and then you're done. Shrena, yeah.
Sorry, I think you might have talked about this in class, but how long is the midterm?
How long is the midterm? So I haven't written it yet, but I would say like comparable to the past midterms.
But like, how long do we have to write it? Like an
Oh,
hour?
I see, I see. 1 hour 15, 1 hour 45 minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like the usual. I think like all of them are like that, right? And so were like the other midterms so far different, or
I don't know. I would say, yeah, like
yeah,
an hour 45 around.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that's like the midterm time slot is like all the same always. Yeah, yeah. So I probably didn't say it because they're kind of all the same. Yeah. Or like unless someone specifies otherwise, I guess. Yeah. All right. Is there yeah, so I think this is like everything that I promised. So those like obviously kind of I tried to make kind of yesterday's session kind of, you know, more kind of about the fundamentals. Those ones obviously were like the harder ones. So I think this is all the questions that they can do right now, just in terms of material that's been covered so far. So does anyone want to hear me talk about anything else?
If there were some, like, if we wanted to go through the midterms on our own, how do
Mhm.
we know which questions we should and shouldn't be able to do
Yeah,
based on what we've
you
learned?
kind of don't. So I'm planning today to kind of post a list.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
And then do you have any advice on like how to practice coding? Like I know it just comes with practice, but like writing by hand, and coding.
I think it's kind of like a little bit individual in terms of I would just try writing it and see how it goes and see kind of whether you notice just kind of from trying to write kind of a new problem from coding bad, for example, or from past midterms. Like if you notice particular issues that you have kind of compared to writing on the computer, you know, just kind of try to address those. I would say that one thing that probably would, so kind of the midterm is also time constrained, right? So that's a separate issue. But kind of what I do in class a lot of the time is I try to kind of trace the code both using Paizo, but also sometimes just kind of by hand. And what I do, as you saw in lectures, like I sometimes kind of type out like this would be the input, this would be output, and like those are the steps. I think doing that to the extent possible when you're trying to solve the problem and you're not like maybe you just have time and you want to check your work, that's definitely a way to check your work, to kind of go line by line with a particular input and just write out what the output would be. I think like sometimes you are kind of like in the process of solving the problem and you're maybe not sure if you have solved the problem correctly or like if you're on the right track. And again, kind of plugging in a particular number or like a particular input and just going line by line and saying, okay, like this line, this is what I expect would happen. This line, this is what I would expect would happen. And that could be useful. But again, this is a little bit individual, right? So kind of in the same way that like you're kind of practicing for calculus, and of course you're doing that on paper, and kind of you did, a lot of math in high school as well. I would say like everything that you did in math and that you're doing in math this semester as well applies, right? It's like in a way, code is just kind of math.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. But again, like this is kind of how I approach things. At the end of the day, like at the end of the day, what you want to do is like you want to do the kind of, perform the best you can on the test. And that might mean that you just want to try and see what works for you. It might be that different things work for different people.
And just to confirm, the test is on the 24th, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so 24th. So like the Thursday, yeah, the Thursday 24th. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you mentioned this before, but if I look at the past midterm test, it says there's a reference sheet handed out with the test.
Yeah, I hadn't actually mentioned that, and I think this time around there there probably won't be one. So like if
Oh,
there is
okay.
one, I will announce it, yeah. Actually, I think in 2022 was there? Oh yeah, there was, yeah. Yeah, I might like to be like we haven't so this year the test is a little bit earlier than it used to be. So kind of kind of most of this stuff we kind of haven't done yet and probably won't have done.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So and kind of part of the reason it was there is that like it was kind of new and I just said like don't worry about memorizing it. I'll just put it on the reference sheet. But I think this year, because the test is a little bit earlier, kind of this is less of an issue. Yes. Okay, all right. I guess, I would say enjoy the rest of your day, but it doesn't sound like you will. So, do the best you can. And so the calc, when is calc? It's on Thursday, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Lots of time. Okay. All right. So yeah, I'll see. Okay. I'll check one more time if there's nothing in Discord. Oh, there's stuff in the chat. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That seems to have been addressed. Okay. All right. Cool. All right. Enjoy your day. See ya.
Thank you. Have a good Thanksgiving.